And here we are. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what I think is the fourth podcast in the State of the Union addresses, which we have decided is necessary for the upkeep of the Union. And I'm delighted to be joined tonight not only by my good friend Niall Fraser, but we have, for the first time making her podcast debut, we have Jean-Anne Mitchell. Hello, Jean-Anne.
Hello.
hello, guys. It's
Pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful, great to have you. So, we are in a new facility, purpose-built, you might say, facility. It's not really purpose-built at all, but it's something we're going to be using for the next few podcasts, so bear with us. We should have some decent sound and vision today, and we have got a very, very nice facility here, so we're all feeling rather excited. So there's lots of stuff to talk about today. Niall is scribing furiously.
I know. So the first thing we need to kick off with has got to be battling Spain.
Absolutely.
Because our dear friend George is fighting another election. And he's coming close. Mm-hmm. So I think he'll narrowly miss out on winning it. I mean, I'm hoping he wins it, obviously, but I think he'll narrowly miss out to the Tories. And I think Labour are going to be in a distant fourth, fifth.
Good.
The longer that Labour go on like this, it just seems like they're just dying a death. I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
Well, I'm really disappointed in the whole conduct of this election, because I've been a Westminster candidate twice now. And on each occasion, I can honestly say it was pleasant. It was a pleasant experience. You know, we were all challenging one another and wanting to win. It was competitive, but it wasn't as nasty and personal as this is. And, you know, for me, I've watched a lot of things, and for me, the chap that challenged the Labour candidate, all the media are saying that the Labour candidate has refused interviews. She's not allowed to talk to the media, that everything's got to be done through the Labour Party press office, despite the fact that you've got someone with a camera standing waiting to chat to you. You know, as if you've got the balls to be a candidate, then you should be trusted to speak, have an opinion.
Surely you should be, really looking forward to all these camera moments and stuff.
You want to get your message across.
Of course. So,
but for me, I've seen the way that this whole thing was presented. The chap that had come from, I think it was Birmingham, and had come to ask questions on behalf of his Muslim brothers, and they were stating that they weren't happy with what was being taught in school in relation to sex education, which, as a parent,
rightfully so,
I want to know what my child's going to be taught in school. Thank God I'm beyond that, but I'm now a grandmother, and I'm interested in what's going forward, and I've very much got my eye on the ball to see what's going forward. But, Kim Ledbetter presented the situation where she was absolutely traumatised after the event. But if you look at that particular screening, she was laughing at the guy, as if, who's this guy coming to talk to me, I'm not going to talk to him, and she's standing with her arms folded, smiling, actually quite insulting if you look at it from a different perspective. But then to present that George Galloway was laughing when he saw her being presented as, the Labour candidate getting traumatised by this man. Hounded. Yeah. I mean, grow up. This is a grown-up election. It's not something that's not going to happen. And coming back to Batley again, I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but the news was that the leader of the Labour Council and her husband, I think it was, were filmed removing George Galloway's posters. Now, not only is that illegal, the Electoral Commission should be all over that.
Yeah.
But see, to be honest with you, so should the Labour Party.
Quite
I
right.
know.
Yes.
You're absolutely spot on. I mean, that should be a resignation
Well,
situation.
to my mind, that also calls into question the legality of, whether the candidate is involved in all of that.
Yep.
And if the candidate is involved in that, then that
Is it
bears
like
serious
a
questions.
electoral ethics board that should be investigating this
Well,
sort of
no,
thing?
I mean, the thing is, right, look at it this way. They've apparently taken down, and the council, which is the Labour Council, have instructed their staff, so basically at taxpayers' expense,
Yeah.
to go and take down George Galloway's posters. I've never in my life heard anything like it.
On the public purse.
It's
On the public
actually-
purse. But also, it's illegal. It is absolutely illegal. And to be honest, that should be a Labour disciplinary matter. They should be absolutely disciplined. And if George Galloway is short of 500 votes or 1,000 votes,
Yeah.
Oh, then
then that brings that whole election into question. It
you're
has
absolutely
to.
right.
Absolutely right.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Because it's unethical play.
Yes.
Has the Labour candidate said anything to distance herself from these incidents? Do we know?
Not that I've heard.
Not that I've heard
What was
either,
it? Just a councillor that done that?
apparently.
It was the Labour leader, and it's a Labour...
So Labour Council in
Labour
Ballymena.
Council, yeah.
Right, okay. I mean,
And her husband's
the whole
also a
situation's
councillor.
totally bonkers. I mean, you touched on that. It's such a toxic political environment. Now.
It's not nice.
You had sort of a semi-pleasant experience when you ran for your campaign, but the new, I mean, it really is toxic and horrible.
Yep.
And they're
It's
looking
personal.
Yes.
It's personal. It's not that it's, the people in Batley and Spen are not stupid. And they, George Galloway isn't responsible for all the things that have gone wrong in that council.
Absolutely
And I
not.
heard someone saying on TV today that the Labour candidate can't be held responsible for things that have happened historically. Well, I'm sorry. The Labour candidate is representing the Labour Party.
Absolutely right.
So on the whole Labour, what in a hypothetical situation,
Mm-hmm.
what will happen if Labour come fourth or fifth in this?
Well, I think what would happen straight away is there would be a left-wing leadership challenge. I think that would happen straight away. I don't know whether Starmer would necessarily resign, but if they had a really disastrous result, Dawn Butler or somebody like that
Yeah,
would
they're
stand.
talking about Dawn Butler today
Yeah.
as being,
Yeah.
intent in having a leadership challenge.
Yeah, so I think unless they win the seat, I think that probably will happen. If he does, if
Well,
he do,
I don't think they're ever winning a seat.
no, for sure. So I think if they don't win the seat, and we're all assuming they won't
And by
win
the
the
way,
seat.
that's not George Galloway's fault if they don't win that seat.
It's their fault.
Well, yeah, absolutely. George Galloway wasn't standing in Hartlepool when
It's
they
not
lost that one.
it's not someone else's fault if you are not elected.
Exactly.
So you can't, and I heard again some of the other candidates talking today, and they were talking about vote splitting. Well,
Yeah.
as has been adequately put, every elector has got the ability to vote for whoever they want to.
Exactly.
And it's not vote splitting, it's people voting with their feet the way they
Absolutely.
want to vote.
Indeed.
Whether
Indeed.
that's
It's
going to
always,
return a
always the smaller
Labour
parties that they
MP.
accuse of vote splitting
and
as
how
well.
true that
Always.
is, yeah.
It's, I mean, the Labour never stand in for anything, but
Yeah.
they'll always accuse other people of
Well,
vote splitting.
We saw this in the election up here.
Yeah.
One thing I
I
just
know.
wanted to add is that Jean Ann was talking about there were two candidacies, both were for the Labour Party.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Westminster. So
And
it's
I
not
left
like-
the Labour Party
Yeah.
afterwards because it was so toxic.
There you go, indeed. And we were talking about this earlier. Sorry to do that, and a lot of people say this. We were just talking off camera earlier, but we were describing when we were all candidates, obviously for All for Unity, and I think we agreed that we were the nicest bunch of candidates, weren't we?
We
We
were.
tried
Everybody
to
got
be
on well.
respectable, and we tried to
We
be
were respectful of every other
exactly,
candidate that stood,
exactly
no matter who their party was.
Yes.
Indeed. So let's see. I would certainly call for a return to those days because I think that's very, very important. So one thing I think will happen is I think the Labour Party will struggle to get to grips with what they're trying to do from here because they're not landing a glove on Boris Johnson.
No.
They're singularly failing to make any impact in Holyrood. And so where do you go? Starmer just looks like a fish out of water in that role to me. It
Well,
doesn't look natural.
we stood as candidates
Yep.
in the Scottish parliamentary election. George Galloway came up with a formula that was guaranteed to return more pro-union candidates
Yes.
Yes,
for every party.
yes.
and we would stand on the list. But instead of talking to one another and agreeing, and it wasn't as if they didn't know what they were doing, because after 13 years,
Of course, I knew what they were
they
doing.
knew that if they didn't work together just once, that you would have a repeat of the status quo of 13 years. So, in fact, I think they chose to, rather than look at the formula that was a workable formula, what they chose to do was to allow another SNP minority government.
It's incredible, isn't it? Really?
Why?
It's like they preferred to be in opposition than to have an opportunity of being in government, and I cannot understand that at all.
Well, it's
It
a
just
perfect.
defeats me.
It's almost a perfect segue. I mean, there's personal attacks on politicians now rather than their ideas.
Yep.
It's playing the man, not the ball, which is a perfect segue into the hypocrisy with the Scottish fans.
Absolutely right.
And we'll get back to the SNP bashing
Yes.
because that's what we're best at. So the Scottish fans.
Yep.
Apparently, they are to blame for the COVID spike. They are to blame.
I heard it was the Scottish fans that stayed at home because they were having lots of people into their houses to
Oh,
watch
really?
football.
Okay,
so
fine.
we've
Yeah.
so we should just turn the tellies off.
Yeah, exactly.
So that nothing can happen. But it's a hypocrisy that we're trying to highlight with Rangers fans
Yes.
and Scottish fans in particular. And obviously, you're an avid Rangers fan, so am I. But
Indeed. I'll just say a little bit about this in case this to pick up. Niall is, of course, quite right. When Rangers won when the Rangers were awarded the Scottish League title for the first time in 10 years, earlier this year, their fans got together at Ibrox Stadium, as the police had been told they would be doing, and as the club had warned people would happen. So the club asked to get a fan zone open nearby. No,
Yes.
the SNP Council wouldn't have that. So the fans said, well, we're going to march into George Square, and they did, and they marched quite peacefully into George Square. And obviously in George Square there were some incidents we know, and these incidents are always
we've all seen
shown.
the videos,
Exactly. A few fights and some stuff broken and some mess. Okay, not good. That wasn't a good part of it, but it was in general a joyous celebratory day. Widespread condemnation throughout Scotland from the SNP, and much talk of the Rangers as an institution being anti-Catholic and all this complete nonsense. So that was reaction number one. Fast forward a few weeks, and then Scotland playing in Wembley. So the Scotland fans go down, although they were told not to, and most of the fans who went down didn't get in. We all saw the scenes in Trafalgar Square and everywhere else, so all the Scotland fans. Now they came back, and there was hardly a murmur from the SNP about this. Absolutely.
dead silence.
But could you tell me one other thing?
Yeah.
You know, how come we were allowed to have for the Euros a fan zone,
Absolutely, indeed.
and yet at Ibrox they weren't allowed to have a fan zone?
Well,
I
if you
think
remember,
the standard answer would be time.
Yeah.
It's a time thing. You know, we're trying to end the lockdown, and at that point, I think the Freedom Day was still at the 19th of June.
Yeah.
But there's.
But I mean, you're right, it is time. But the other thing, of course, was UEFA, the organisers, said to all of the host countries, you either commit to allowing certain numbers of supporters into the stadiums, or we're going to pull out your venues. You're not going to get to stay them. So magically, overnight, Scotland went from, no, we're definitely not letting any fans in. So, well, maybe we could let some fans in. So, of course, they did, not in time for the Scottish football season, naturally enough, but in time for the Scotland game. And Nicola Sturgeon was asked in her daily address to the nation yesterday, was there a double standard here? Were you more critical and condemnatory of the Rangers fans and the Scotland fans? And her answer was no, not at all. And let's not forget that the Rangers fans also were guilty of anti-Catholic and anti-Irish racism. So it's important not to forget that. What the hell does that have to do with anything?
Hang on a minute. Yeah. I mean, how hypocritical does this have to get?
I know.
Absolutely.
You know,
I know.
I mean, what about Mr. Dorian?
Yes, indeed.
You know,
Mr. Dornan, yes.
Dornan. Sorry,
Yeah.
my apologies. Dornan, Mr. Dornan.
Yep.
I mean, Mr. Dornan.
Yep.
What the heck was that about? So on the 17th of March, a bus company who had been suffering absolute torture from young people, I think it was, destroying their buses by throwing rocks through the windows of the buses. But it just so happened that one of the nights that the bus service was taken off was the 17th of March.
That's right. Yep.
So that made it an anti-Catholic
It's this.
I
this
hope that bus company sues their backside for that.
absolutely, it's ridiculous.
It's
Well,
dreadful. I can't stand this
It's this manufactured
stirring up
exactly.
sectarianism.
Which is what it is exactly right.
Well, you used the word sectarianism
and,
there.
and the people,
so they try to abolish this word as
they're
well.
trying to do away with that word and redefine it as anti-Irish racism, anti-Catholic. I mean, this to me is stoking up. This isn't trying to make it better, just trying to make it worse.
I'll tell you something, I'm a Catholic, and I really am furious about this.
Well said, Gina. Well said. It's disgraceful. It's trying to cause splits where no splits exist. It's trying to create division, and it's appalling. It's everything I detest in politicians. I hate it. So yes, it's the height of hypocrisy. And for Nicholas Sturgeon to talk about in a COVID briefing, oh well, of course we were condemnatory of those guys when they broke COVID region because they were also singing some dodgy songs, which has got nothing to do with anything. But that's apparently why she had said what she said. So we're living almost through the looking glass here. You know, Scotland fans with their anti-English songs are all fine, but don't march to George Square and sing a dodgy song about the Pope or something. Otherwise, you'll spread COVID. Apparently, so I don't get it at all.
This COVID is so
exactly.
clever.
Isn't it great? I know, it's fantastic. So yeah, laughable stuff indeed. But sadly, these are
serious stuff.
Serious stuff indeed. Yeah. So very, very disappointing. But luckily, I think most people are seeing, oh, this is just fanciful. All this stuff. I don't think anybody's taking it seriously. But they're trying. They're really trying to push this narrative.
It's shocking. It really is.
Not helpful.
No.
Moving swiftly on from Rangers fans, and to be honest, it's blatant hypocrisy. In the same breath, I'm not being hypocritical, I'm not treating anybody the same, but Rangers pointing the finger again. It's just, it is, honestly, to say that in the same breath, it's just unbelievably galling.
Does that lead me to think that there are no Rangers supporters that support Scotland?
Well, that's a really, really
interesting question.
Yeah. It used to be, and I mean, Niall, I'm much older now. I remember the days when the Scotland support was fundamentally made up of Rangers fans and some other fans from smaller clubs. Most Celtic fans didn't really care about Scotland. I'm using huge generalisations here. I'd like to take that back. In fact, in the main, sorry, I wouldn't say most Celtic fans. That's not true. A lot, but there was more. Yeah, there was more. Fervour about the Scotland team from the Rangers support than there was from the support of other clubs. Today it's the absolute opposite. Today it's mainly the smaller clubs. I mean, I've got friends who go abroad with Scotland all the time, and they tell me it's guys from Dundee, from Aberdeen, from Kilmarnock, from Inverness who go, because it's they do it fundamentally for the travel. So whereas Rangers and Celtic, well, we probably get into Europe most seasons and we get to travel to Europe, so it's not such a thrill for us. Plus, of course, the Scotland national team has been dreadful for over 20 years now. It's been absolutely terrible. You wouldn't want to go and see them. So, but the makeup of the Scotland support has fundamentally changed, and I would say not for the better either. Because when you consider the songs in their repertoire these days, you've got Do a Deer. And you've got Yes Sir I Can Boogie. I mean, I don't go to...
I know. Where did that song come from?
See, to be honest, I thought I'd missed something. I thought I must have gone to sleep and forgotten to wake up, and then all of a sudden I'd missed something. So what the heck was that about?
I still don't know. Yes Sir I Can Boogie, was that in the charts when 1978 or something?
I have no idea why that song was chosen. None whatsoever. But getting off the whole Rangers stuff, let's talk about the main man, the best man in Scotland,
Sorry, I'm going to have to put my head in my hands.
Hamza Youssef. And, he made a statement earlier in the week saying, something like, I wouldn't mind being First Minister.
Move over, Nicola.
Wouldn't mind.
Watch your back.
Well, actually, I think the majority of Scotland would mind.
Absolutely.
And I've got written down here, he's angling for First Minister.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up in a fisherman outfit, because he shows up in every other outfit. He's a surgeon, he's a dentist. I mean, what other things has he wore? The guy is. He goes and just absorbs.
I've not seen him in a
whatever
judge's
building
wig.
he's in.
I've not seen him when he was the Justice Minister.
That would be hilarious, by the way. If
with his wee
hammer.
hammer.
Gavel. Oh, God. I mean, that would be the darkest day in Scotland's history if Hamza Youssef got in, because, I mean, God knows what he'd be wearing.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be his clothes?
Oh, for goodness sake. Dreadful. What a thought.
mean, the guy he's done more damage to Scotland than any other person in my mind.
Well, I've spoken to lots of people in the health service who are absolutely so depressed.
That he's Taken over.
Yeah.
God.
Mind you, Jean Freeman was not any better.
I bet the police are relieved.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At least
them
a
anymore,
tiny
yeah.
bit relieved.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then the health service. I mean, you
Oh.
couldn't have put a more inept person in as
Yeah.
a health secretary
Yeah.
when we're in a global pandemic. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable
Yeah.
oversight. I mean, they should
I
have.
mean,
picked-
I mean, for me, I just think that the whole makeup of our parliament is ludicrous. I mean, you've got people taking responsibility for really serious things like, law and order and crime and the health service, who have no experience
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
of the health service, who've got no experience
But he
of
can turn up and he'll wear a
of
surgical
law.
mask and
Yeah.
he'll,
Oh, I
he'll
mean,
dress
it's
as a
just
surgeon.
absolute
He's
nonsense.
top notch at role playing.
Yep.
It's
And
nonsense.
that gets to the bottom
Drama
line.
school.
He's a role player, a live action role player. He lives his adventure. I'm going to be a surgeon today.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
going to be a policeman today.
No.
Yep.
I mean,
a
they must
judge
be
would
laughing all the way to the bank.
Yep.
I know. Aye.
There's no two ways about it.
It's
They're laughing all the
shocking.
way to the bank.
Yep. What else can we say about this man?
Oh.
Other than that he's our Lord and Saviour.
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting. They've taken decisions about, keeping us all
Yep.
locked down, and people have adhered to the rules. They've stuck by the rules. They've not seen their granny in care homes.
Yep.
Their grannies have died in care homes,
Absolutely.
Yes.
and they didn't have to.
Well, I mean, who put the people in the care homes?
Yeah,
if we want to
quite.
go back
But
to that.
I'll tell you this, I've looked after my mother throughout this pandemic, and she had 2 heart attacks post-COVID. And I have absolutely wrapped her up in cotton wool and carried her about in a blanket. Now, there was no way my mother would ever have ended up in care, but she did have 10 days in hospital, and she's profoundly deaf. So what happened when she was in hospital, her age, 87, and her deafness, that made her, to be honest,
Yep.
less of a person.
Yep.
She was supposed to be transferred to the Golden
What do
Jubilee.
you mean in that?
Well, I
What do you
mean
mean?
that she was
She
down
was
the
treated
pecking
differently.
order. She was treated differently. So basically, she was left to be in a single room where basically someone came in. Because she was on a monitor, there was very little interaction. Because the nursing staff could monitor her from a bay, a nurse's station. But she was told from the minute she went in that she had to go to the Golden Jubilee to have surgical intervention. And overnight, the night she went in, the whole visiting thing changed. And instead of me being able to go in, the first day she was in hospital, I went the following day and spent the day with her because they were short-staffed. And they were delighted to have me there to look after my mum.
Yep.
The next day, without any warning, the visiting man came in.
Right.
And in that first 48 hours, I went to the hospital to deliver stuff to my mum and couldn't do so because there was nothing organised before they organised the volunteers to do the running from
Yeah.
the reception up. So my mum had no hearing aid batteries, she had no mobile phone charger, she had no credit in her phone.
Just couldn't
Right,
go in
so
it.
my mum was completely and utterly isolated, and she is profoundly deaf. So I manage her hearing aids for her really, really well, and make sure she can hear. So every single day, I would say to the nursing staff, "Look, is my mum hearing? Oh, don't know. Oh, my mum's profoundly deaf. There should be notes in her notes about that."
Exactly. Yeah.
And there wasn't. So every single day,
That's
there was
shocking.
nobody managing that. So my mum, if she doesn't understand, is such a polite lady.
Yep.
She's a lovely lady. You've all met her.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my mum, rather than say, "Oh, I can't hear you," because she's embarrassed about that,
Yeah.
if you said something to her, my mum would agree with you.
Yep.
So I had to say to them, "Look, I've got power of attorney. My brother's got power of attorney for my mum. Do not ask my mum to make any decisions about her health
Exactly.
without discussing it with us.
Quite.
Because if she'd been a foreign national,
Yeah.
she was in that ward for 10 days, waiting every single day of those 10 days to get transferred to the Golden Jubilee. And she wasn't understanding. She had no visitors and she couldn't understand what was being said. So Had she been a foreign national,
Yeah.
she would have been afforded an interpreter.
Yeah.
So I tried to argue the case. Look,
All right, okay.
She's deaf.
okay,
Yeah,
she's
exactly,
deaf.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I'm talking about this tonight is because I think there must be a lot of people in this position
yeah,
who are
sure.
frail elderly with
Yes.
complex needs, but they may be blind, they may be deaf.
Yep.
Doesn't make them less of a human being.
No.
It makes them more of a vulnerable human being that needs to be cared for.
Ultimately, it's
Absolutely
they're harder to look after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
But
no,
most
that's a
of, most
stump-
well,
that's what
elderly people
happens.
are no bother. Most of them are absolutely no bother.
Yep.
You know, so I think the message I'm trying to get across here is, you know, there's all sorts of decisions being made about do not resuscitate.
Yeah.
You know, I heard about somebody who was deaf who was in their 50s,
Right.
and it was some deaf-blind charity, who had raised the matter because this person had, at 52 or 53, I think the guy was, he was going for surgery. And they asked him about a do not resuscitate,
Yeah.
a DNR. And the guy said, don't be ridiculous.
This DNR thing is really troubling.
Yeah, I think we
really
flow
troubling.
into this DNR, and I think it's a very dodgy ground. And I think that the whole COVID thing,
It's has exacerbated the situation.
well, no, I think it's even worse than that. I think it has been used as an excuse,
Yes.
especially with our frail elderly in the nursing homes who were so badly let down.
An excuse so that it could treat other people.
Yeah, there's a priority, a pecking order. So,
This is-
you know, your National Health Service is not for all at point of need as it was when it was
Yeah,
when
of
it was
course.
set up. There is no question about it. There are priorities. Now, I know we can't do everything.
No.
However, you know, who are we to be judging
Yeah.
who gets to live and die?
Quite right.
Absolutely. We can't be doing that.
No. No.
We can't have death
Cannot
panels. We
plead
can't
God.
be deciding who. It's shocking that that's even being
I
discussed.
mean, do you know one of the first questions that are asked? I don't know whether you've got a power of attorney.
My parents are dead, so.
No.
For-
For yourself.
Oh, no.
Well, I've got a power of attorney.
Have you? Who's it,
Oh,
your son?
absolutely. My daughter and my brother.
Right.
And my lawyer.
When did you
A
set
power
that
of
up?
attorney.
Recently?
I set that up a year ago in April.
Right, okay.
Now,
okay.
everyone should have a power of attorney.
Just in case.
Just
you-
in
you-
case.
you-
Because in the event of anything happening to you, one of the first questions that's asked, do you have a power of attorney?
Got you. Okay.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
Really
Everybody
interesting.
should have a power of attorney.
That's
Everybody
incredible.
thinks a power of attorney is most important for financial matters.
Right.
But a power of attorney only kicks in relation to financial matters when somebody loses capacity.
Yes, of course.
Power of attorney is most important for health matters.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because, say for example, you've got a mental health problem and you've
Right.
got no power of attorney.
Yep. They can do whatever they want to.
One of the first questions is, do you own your own home?
God. Yeah.
What happens then?
And they appoint a social worker
Right.
who then looks after your finances.
What?
And who then decides, the social work department, along with the medics, decide where your onward care should be.
What?
Yes.
This is why it's great
So,
to have you here, because this
if
is
you-
enlightening. It really is.
Absolutely.
If you're my
Fantastic.
brother
Yep.
and you don't have a power of attorney,
Right.
and God forbid something happens to you, my brother does have a power of attorney, by the way, because I insisted upon it when I started to look into this.
Yep.
All of my family, I'm trying to get even my children to have a power of attorney.
Just in case.
Wow.
Because anything can happen to anyone
Of
at any
course,
point in
yeah.
time.
I mean, accidents happens all the time.
So if you are a property owner, that can be the difference between how your care goes. You know, in
So-
terms of if you're going to be going to a nursing home, if you're a homeowner, that's fine. You got a power of attorney? No. Okay, we'll now be looking after your affairs.
And then what?
Good
What happens to this
grief.
house and all that stuff? Does that?
Your house becomes an asset to the health service or to the government to pay for your care.
This is disgusting.
Yep.
So it's something that is really quite a serious issue
You're not
that I
wrong.
think we have to talk about a number of times on our podcast
Definitely.
because
we could do a whole episode on this NHS.
we could
We really
because
could.
because the thing about it is if somebody has got no relatives and no power of attorney and nobody to speak up for them,
Yep.
There is a serious... I've got a friend who's got MS, and she had no power of attorney.
Okay.
Her husband had a heart attack. He didn't have power of attorney.
Right.
Now, that immediately thrust her into a very unsettled area where if something had happened to her, because it takes quite a while to get your power of attorney, and in the event of something having happened to him,
Yep.
well, the hospital contacted her and her daughter and said that they would be invoking DNR for her husband, who's in his 60s, 67 or something, 66, 67, and they were going to, invoke a DNR. And they said, absolutely not.
Oh, naturally.
My husband wants to live.
Absolutely.
My husband does
Absolutely.
not want to die. Now, she then had a problem and had to be admitted to hospital. And my worry, because I'm a Rottweiler fighting for anyone that's an underdog, I had to take her carers to task because one of her carers was being abusive towards her. And I went to the Care Commission and all of that. Right. And I couldn't believe the circus and the length of time it took me to get to the Care Commission, to get answers back from the Care Commission. But basically, this person was found to have abused her verbally on more than one occasion. Nothing was done about it. Nothing happened about it. The girl gets sent on a training course because they've got such a shortage of carers.
God.
This is just mental.
So, I think we've got a situation here
The
where
health service seems to be on its knees, actually.
we have to be very aware of what's happening in our communities.
Yes.
And we have to be aware of young people who have got, say, for example, MS or something like that, multiple sclerosis, or mental health issues, or learning difficulties or whatever, whereby they have got someone in the community looking after them. I think their families have to be aware that if they want to have an opinion, then they have to have a power of attorney.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
that's a lesson learned for everyone watching this.
Yeah, well, it's very, very important because without a power of attorney, your family, your husband, your wife, your children do not have any say over where you are cared for in the event of further care and long-term care having to come into the equation. And most importantly, there is a financial aspect to this because the social workers want to know, do you own your own home?
That's the first question you asked.
Do you have a power of attorney?
No.
Do you own your own home?
No. Yes.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. There's your care.
That's an asset.
Wow. So this is...
So don't think for a minute that the NHS is free.
Anything but.
We all pay our taxes to the NHS.
No, it's never free. Yeah.
Right, so it's never free. But in terms of onward care, don't think for 1 minute that onward care is free.